Hey everybody, it's Emily at ARG Schooling, and I thought today I would talk about some of the things I've read recently. It's been a minute. I'm trying to get myself back into filming, and I thought today, since I'm terrible at doing wrap-ups, I would instead just talk about some of the things I've read recently so I can talk about what I've been reading. So as of now, it is Sunday. It is June 9th, and I have read 5 books this month so far. And I thought it'd be fun to just kind of talk about what I've read and my thoughts. So the first book I finished this month was Sachiko, and this is a Nagasaki bomb survivor's story by Karen Stelson. I read this for level 11, the update I'm working on, and I had originally Hiroshima, I can't think of the author's name, but I had that book in the level, and it was good, but it was very like cold, written from like a journalistic perspective. So it was sort of just telling you facts, and while I found it interesting, I always wished I could find something that was a little bit more, I don't want to say emotional, but kind of that. And so when I came across this book, I got excited because I thought this could potentially work for what I had originally in mind, and I was right. This was fantastic. So this is a story about a woman who was 6 years old when the bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, and it's her experiences and what happened to her family, and like how she was able to like overcome the things that happened to her. And the story itself is very readable, very interesting, very sad, but like I think it's important to know like what actually happened. And what I loved about this was that Sachiko was able to latch on to like these people who inspired her towards like a more peaceful existence. So like Helen Keller is a person that she really looked up to for like finding her voice and being able to like stand up and have beliefs that she could express. And like Mahatma Gandhi was an inspiration to her father and to her, specifically for his nonviolence. And then she would hear like Martin Luther King speak, and then she became fascinated by his message and wanting to like teach people about what happened and a better way to respond. And I just thought it was very well done. I really appreciated her perspective, and that like she was somebody who experienced a really horrific event and a lot of tragedy, and came out on the other side of it with this positive attitude about like a peaceful way to exist, and like trying to teach people to fight for that. And I just thought that was beautiful. So I loved this. I thought it was excellent. I gave it 5 stars. I read Lavender House by Lev A.C. Rosen, and this was probably my lowest rating so far this month, and it was a 3.5. And that has nothing to do with the book. This is just not a genre that I generally read. This was a like murder mystery noir, and I've never read anything like that before. I've read mysteries. That's not a genre I generally gravitate towards. Specifically, like police solving a mystery is just not a thing that I enjoy. What I did like about this book, so just to give you a brief synopsis, this is a story about, it's set in the 1950s, and it's about a man whose name I can't remember. I think it was something like Andy. And he was a police officer, but when they raided a gay club, he was found there in a compromising position and immediately fired from the police force. And basically his entire life has fallen apart. And he's considering killing himself because he doesn't really know what to do now. And he doesn't see a way forward. And that's when he is requested by this woman to investigate what she believes was a murder. Her wife was killed. And she really strongly thinks somebody murdered her. And so she asks him to work the case. And he almost says no because, like, he's not a police officer anymore. And, you know, he doesn't really think this is something he could do anymore. And she convinces him. He goes to stay at their house. And it's called Lavender House. And they are like a soap empire. And their living situation is interesting because they are several gay couples, but they're all married to somebody else. So like they can present themselves as straight to society and whatnot. But at home in Lavender House, they can be themselves and be who they really are and love who they love. And so I found that part of the story really interesting. I did not really like the murder mystery aspect of it. It was fine. Nothing against it. It just, you know, it's not really a thing I get into. I will say I liked the audiobook because the narrator sounds very much like what you would expect like a 1950s noir detective story to sound like. Like he just had like that really gruff demeanor. That worked really well for the story. So I liked that. So I gave it a 3.5. It was fine. It's just not my genre, but I really needed to read something that was LGBTQ plus history for the Build Your Library Reading Challenge, and I didn't have anything on my shelves that was specifically like queer historical fiction or queer history that I was like in the mood to read right now. So when I was at the library and I saw Lavender House, I had remembered I'd seen several people post that, and I have read something else by him. Like the man is a good writer. Like I really liked the writing style. And I liked the characters a lot. And that's what kept me reading, was my intrigue about like how these characters were relating to each other, how the characters were going to like change by the end of the story, and like the dynamics in the house. All of that was really interesting. So 3.5 stars. Like I didn't dislike it. It just wasn't my favorite thing. And it's not a genre I see myself picking up again. Then I read The 10th Mistake of Hank Hooperman. This is a middle grade by Jennifer Chaldenko. And this might have been my favorite middle grade. I want to say of the year, but that might not be right because I have read a few other middle grade this year that I absolutely loved. But this one was really, really good. So this is a contemporary, like hard-hitting middle grade story about a boy named Hank Hooperman, who his mother has been gone for a week now, and he doesn't know what happened to her. He's at home taking care of his little sister, who he calls Boo, and she's 3. So Hank is like 11 and Boo is 3. And they are each other's like world. Like they don't have any other family. His grandmother recently died. And he doesn't know anybody else. And so she's been gone for a week, and they're about to get evicted from their apartment. And in sort of like a what else can I do situation, Hank ends up looking up or going to this woman's house that his mother had put down as an emergency contact on a permission slip once. So he goes to this woman's house. He's never met her before. She doesn't know him that well. She knows of him, but she ends up having to take these 2 children in, and she doesn't really know what to do about this. So he is still desperately trying to find his mom and figure out what happened to her and why she's been gone. And so you have like him and his sister staying with this elderly woman who runs a home daycare, so she can handle Boo, and she's good with taking care of a 3-year-old, but she does not know what to do with a teenager, or what she calls a teenager. He's 11. And so he befriends their neighbor, Ray, who he enlists to help him look for his mother. And the story itself is really frustrating to read, but like weirdly in a good way. Like I loved it. I was so invested in what was happening, and like I needed to know what happened to his mother, why this was happening. They like start dropping hints like that she had a lot of problems, that maybe she could possibly have had a drinking problem. Like there's something going on here. by like the midpoint, I was like, this woman better be dead. Like, what's happening right now? But the story is sad. It's really well done. Like the characters. I was deeply in love with Hank and Boo and their neighbor Ray, and the kids at school are great. Like, I loved the characters in this book so much. They all felt very real, very like three-dimensional. I loved it. I would say this is one of those books that like certain readers are going to see themselves in the story. They're going to really get what Hank is going through. Some people will have no idea that things like this happen. And I think it's important for kids who come from a good home to understand like what it's like for other people who might not be as lucky as them. And that's something that Hank like talks about throughout the story. Like, he's at these other people's homes and he's like, wouldn't it be amazing to live like this? And which just made me so sad for him. So like, this book was really, really well done. I think the author stated that it was based on her older brother and like how he cared for them growing up. And that, which was just even more sad to me, like that she had that to base it on, but also just like, it was really good. It was really, really good. I'm gonna call it right now that this is gonna be nominated for the Sybils. I just feel like it's gonna be a finalist. I feel it in my bones that this will be like a Sybils finalist for the middle grade category. Just putting it out there into the universe. I gave it 5 stars, of course. I read The Radium Girls by Kate Moore. This was a book that was already in level 11, and I'd sort of like skimmed through it then when I put it in originally, and I really wanted to do like a reread and like really deep read it this time. I almost annotated it, but I decided I didn't have time for that too. So I just read it. But I love this book. I loved it when I skimmed it and read it really quickly the first time. This time doing a deeper read. Oh my gosh, this book is so fascinating, like morbidly fascinating, so frustrating to read. This is a story about women in the like early 1900s, 1920s, into the 30s who worked for the radium companies. They were tasked with painting the watch dials. They were dial painters, and they painted them with radium paint so that they would glow. And they were told that there's nothing dangerous about this. They were told that it's 100% safe. They were supposed to like lick the paintbrushes like to a point to get the paint just right to make it the most precise. So they were ingesting a lot of the radium paint, and obviously that had some pretty dire consequences. And this is a story of like how they took that to court, how they fought for their rights as workers to be protected and to hold the company accountable for what it did. And I won't like give everything away because obviously this is a true story, you can look it up, but like the book itself is such a fascinating read. It's such like a disturbing case, but like their story is really important in the history of like workers' rights. So fascinating stuff, really morbid, really weird, loved it. This was a 5-star. And then this morning I finished As Bright as Heaven by Susan Meisner. This is my first Susan Meisner, and I've been wanting to read something by her for a while, and so when I needed to fulfill, I had 2 prompts that this fulfilled. I needed this to fulfill the buzzword challenge, which this month is repeating words. So as was the repeating word here, As Bright as Heaven. And it also worked towards the Build Your Library Reading Challenge because I needed to read a book about a plague, and this is set during the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918. And this is a story about a family who moves to Philadelphia just before the plague starts. And they're working in the husband's uncle's mortuary. And So they really get a first-hand view of the plague, not just as it touched themselves and their family, but like through the uncle's mortuary and like having to bring in so many bodies, more bodies than they could handle. And the story follows the three sisters and the mother and their perspectives on what's happening. This was really, really good. Like the like sense of place and sense of time was really strong. So I really felt like I was there, which I love in a historical fiction. I want to feel like I'm there with them. And so that was amazing. I felt the characters were all really interesting and dynamic on their own, and just like they all had such distinct voices. The story of like their relationships, though, some of it really just didn't work for me. The romance aspect of the story I found weird. Like there's one particular romance where I believe the character, the girl, the sister, was like either 12 or 14, and she was like madly in love with their neighbor who was like 21 and enlisted to go to war. And so they carry on this like friendship relationship. They write letters to each other. And like it was a little bit weird that that's a big age gap. By the end of the story, like she's 21 and he's like 27 or something. I don't know, 28. I'm not even sure now. But like I was a little creeped out by that. But she was a child and he was a grown man. But different time, I suppose. And they were fine with it, but like didn't love that. There was another relationship too that I found a little bit weird that I just didn't love. The end also wrapped up like super neat and tidy, and like the coincidences that had to happen for that I thought were a little bit much, but I still really enjoyed that part of the story. So I can't complain about it, but it did feel a little bit too like easy to wrap up. But it was interesting. It was a very coincidental situation, but I still enjoyed it completely, and I loved this book. I loved the writing of it. I'm definitely going to read more of Susan Meisner's books. So if you know, like, I think I own at least 2 more. I think I have The Last Years of the War, the Last Year of the War or something like that, and I forget the other one I have. It's pink. That's all I can remember. So I'm definitely going to read more by this author. I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4.5 stars. I really only took off like a half star for the weird romance because it's not a major part of the story, but it's a big enough part of the story that I was like, no thank you. But I still really like this. So that is everything I've read so far in June. I'm having a much better reading month this month. Last month was rough. I felt like everything I read was just meh. I wanted something amazing and I didn't get it. But I feel like this month is already off to a good start. I've had 2 5-star reads already. No, 3 5. I've had 3 5-star reads already. I had a 3.5 and I had a 4.5. So like that's not too shabby. I'm pretty happy with that, especially for just the first week of the month. So let me know down below in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Happy reading. Bye.